Coming to you from the shores of sparkling Lake Michigan, welcome to the National Writers Series, celebrating 15 years as a year-round book festival. We are the premier home for passionate readers who love inspiring conversations with best-selling and award-winning authors. Tonight, we welcome #1 New York Times best-selling author Kate Baer and her latest poetry collection, How About Now? Baer's poetry went viral, leading to her first book, What Kind of Woman, released in November 2020 and becoming an instant New York Times bestseller. She has since become a 3-time best-selling author with works such as I Hope This Finds You Well and Yet. Her poems have appeared in publications like The New Yorker, Literary Hub, and The New York Times. Baer grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia in a Christian household and has 4 children. She earned an English degree from Eastern Mennonite University. Her work has been influenced by her upbringing in the diverse cultural landscape of southeastern Pennsylvania. Baer will be joined by our guest host Beth Milligan, a journalist and head writer for the Traverse City Ticker. She is a frequent guest host for the National Writers Series. She co-hosts currently with Crystal Frost podcast and serves on several community advisory boards and committees while living on a small hobby farm on Old Mission Peninsula. The National Writers Series salutes our amazing audiences, dedicated volunteers, and generous supporters for helping us raise the next generation of readers and writers through our free education programs across the region. This season of amazing authors is made possible through major support by the Green Brick Foundation, Northgard Technology Group, Golden Fowler Home Furnishings, West Shore Bank, and Traverse City Tourism. Tonight's event sponsor is the Cottage Bookshop. Tonight's live streaming is exclusively underwritten by Nancy Davey. Thanks to our major media sponsor, the Traverse City Record Eagle, and our media partner, Interlochen Public Radio. For information on future events, programs, and how to support our nonprofit work, please visit nationalwriterseries.org. Now, please welcome to the stage Education Director Audrey Irontree.
Hi everyone, I'm Audrey Irontree and I'm the Education Director for the National Writers Series, and it's such an honor to represent our program. We have a super special guest tonight, Maggie Forsman, who is a 5th grader at Cherry Knoll. She's also taken a couple of our online writing classes and just finished up our poetry workshop, which happened in her school, and she's going to read from her short story. She took a class on detective fiction, so get ready for a detective story. Maggie?
Detective Beatrice Archer tightened her golden yellow ascot and quickly grabbed her sunglasses as she stepped out of her apartment and onto the busy streets of New York City. She was a short-statured, middle-aged woman who could find clues easily with her partner, William J. She had a stressful career being a detective working at one of the top agencies in the world. Although she is short, she might have to do jobs that might seem very tall. It seemed as though she was getting a new email reaching out for help daily. She worked hard at her job. Some might say she's a workaholic. Her job didn't leave a lot of time for leisure or hobbies. However, that little time she could carve out for herself, she spent writing in her next book series of mystery novels for kids. While she was lucky to have gotten her books published, they only had a small following of readers. One evening, she turned to her desk. The computer pinged with an urgent email from her boss. You have an urgent mission to find the missing Mona Lisa. You and William J. must leave at once. The email went on to share the details of the case, including when exactly the painting was stolen and what the suspects look like, etc. She walked to William's office, grabbed him by the arm, and forcefully tugged him out of his office and across the hall as she quickly and quietly pulled him down the stairs and her long blonde ponytail swinging behind her. William said angrily, "What's going on? It's 7 a.m. Beatrice said in a whisper-like voice, "Shh, we're going to France." Once they were in the car rushing to the airport, William said, "So why are we going to France?" We have a mission to do ASAP. Think history, think Da Vinci, think one of the most popular paintings known to man. "The Mona Lisa has gone missing," replied Beatrice. William looked ahead of him as if he had just won the lottery. Beatrice had hadn't been paying attention and slammed on the brakes and said in a tough voice, "Holy Mother of Mystery." William was startled and yelled, "What? What is it?" Beatrice said, I think I have an idea." William looked at the light ahead of them and said, I think we should go. The lights are green." Beatrice stepped on the pedal with her small black high heel and started to tell William the details of the case. They finally arrived at the airport and were soon in the terminal gate waiting for the flight. Of course, William was asleep while the airport looked so beautiful because the sun was just rising. It was soon time for their flight. Beatrice shook William in his chair to wake him up. His shoulder-length black hair a bit of a mess, his brown glasses started to slip off his nose. His big puffy coat bunched up like a pillow. He was snoring like a pig. "Wake up!" He woke up immediately as his glasses fell right off. They boarded the plane as a man with only a small bag walked by. He looked confused, so Beatrice stood up to help him. He asked what was wrong, but he didn't answer. So Beatrice sat back down in her seat. She returned to her seat. She turned around to see if anything was suspicious, but the man had vanished. She wondered. They finally were in the air after waiting to take off. Beatrice didn't mind being in an airplane, but William, on the other hand, got airsick. To see if he could find the man again, she said she was going to the restroom. She casually walked to the back of the plane reading a newspaper she had found on an empty seat. Watching the restroom door, she waited for a small amount of time and was rewarded when the man came out. She walked back to her seat. He didn't notice her as he accidentally bumped into the arm of her seat as he walked by. "Oh, sorry," he said as he walked toward the front row of seats of the airplane. She put on her sunglasses, which is what she did when someone was up to no good. She sat down when the flight attendant approached and asked if Beatrice wanted anything. Beatrice said that William probably wanted some peanuts. The flight attendant grabbed the bags so that Beatrice could give them to William. After he ate them, he did not feel good. William went into the bathroom, and Beatrice saw the man in a different seat, in the front. She started writing in her journal. "He has a black hoodie, a black hat. He is probably about 6 feet tall and has sunglasses, big black boots, and baggy black pants." Beatrice said to herself, "Why does the man keep moving around the airplane?" As confused as she was, she heard an announcement that they were going to be landing in just a little bit. They landed, and William was relieved. But for some reason, the man in the hoodie was trying to be the first person off the plane. Beatrice wondered what was happening, but then they remembered that she was supposed to look for a man in all black. The description, his odd behavior, was just a coincidence, or this man could be involved in the heist. Beatrice told William her suspicions on the way out of the airport. Beatrice and William hopped into the rental car that she reserved the day prior. Soon they were in a small town near Paris. The fresh smell of bread and the sound of water splashing in the pond from the fountain greeted them that chilly fall evening. Dragging their suitcases behind them, Beatrice said, "We have quite the job ahead of us, finding the criminal responsible for taking one of the most iconic pieces of art in the world." William said, "That piece is so expensive, in fact, priceless." Beatrice was wondering, how can we catch him without being so obvious? As she was thinking to herself, William was looking around to see if he could find the hotel they were staying in. He was pretty confused. After wandering the town for a while, they found it. So they walked into the building and into the elevator, saying goodnight to each other. Beatrice went to her room, took a warm and steamy shower, brushed her teeth, put on her coziest jammies, and pulled out her laptop. Tonight would be a great night to start her first chapter of her new novel, The Missing Mona Lisa. What could be a better case to write about? Once William was in his room, he flopped on the bed and immediately started to doze in his travel clothes and all. Not surprising. To be continued.
Thank you so much, Maggie, and welcome to the stage, Doug Stanton.
I wasn't doing that in 5th grade. I don't know about you. Welcome, everyone. It's such a pleasure. I'll be very brief here tonight. I want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank Cottage Bookshop and Nancy Davey for their support this evening. And I want to thank our wonderful reader. Once again, a big hand. It took a lot of courage. Keep doing this and don't give up. Keep telling your stories. You had a crowd of adults here in the palm of your hand, and they were laughing with you. So that's a great accomplishment. Thank you. Nancy Davey and Cottage Bookshop are sponsors tonight. I also want to call your attention to the Poetry Society of Michigan. They're in the lobby. They have a bunch of flyers, and there's a bunch of publications and contests coming up. If you're interested in poetry, I suggest picking that up and maybe joining them and becoming part of their community. And last, I want to thank Michigan writers Susan Odgers and Tom Mayer for being at the table, as they always are, to help bring poetry to our community. And speaking of that, thank you all for being here tonight. I know Kate Baer has an enormous amount of fans here in Michigan. We have people watching from across the state and from across the United States tonight on the NWS digital broadcast. Without further ado, please welcome Kate Baer and Beth Milligan to the stage.
Hello, Traverse City. I'm so happy to be here. I saved the best for last. This is my last stop, and I'm so happy to be here. I got off the plane today in your airport and saw the fireplace, and I was like, am I in a Hallmark movie? Guys are so cute. I called my husband from the hotel, and I was like, I think we should move here. And he was like, absolutely. But he's like high on oxy. He just had his appendix out, so I think he'd move anywhere. But I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we are very excited to have you here. This is your very last stop of the tour. So yes.
Yeah, I saved the best for last. Yeah.
It's been so fun to watch your Instagram for this tour, because the best way I can describe it is like this has been like a rock tour for women. It's like women coming with their book clubs, with their friends. There's hugs, there's gifts. There was gifts in the green room when I walked in tonight from her. She's so nice. And it's been amazing. This is obviously for the men who are here too. We appreciate you being here. You might learn a few things tonight.
Is there a man here? Welcome.
There's a couple scattered in.
That's nice. That's nice.
How has the tour experience been like for you?
It's been wonderful. I think my biggest takeaway from being on the road is that we have never been more thirsty to be together and out of the digital world and into the physical world. I see so many groups of women coming together, or coming alone, and just because they're ready to be out among each other and talking about friendship and poetry and just being together, and that has been so encouraging. So this is the best part. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're here for your new book, How About Now? This is what the tour is for. And you have a poem in here called Interview with a Male Moderator at a Decorated Literary Event. And his question to you in this poem is, do you ever feel that men might feel alienated from your work? And your response is, do you ever feel that men are missing out on the richest parts of humanity? Which I love. You've talked about how important women are to your mental health. You have a poem in here where you call them cathedrals of light, which I love that description. And I love that you think that the reason women probably live longer is because of our relationships with each other. We help keep each other sane through marriage, motherhood, all of these things. Could you talk about right now how female friendships are meaning to you, maybe any differences you've seen between how women and men engage with your work?
Absolutely. Yeah. Last year I went on the 8th grade field trip. I was a chaperone. And when it was time for lunch, all the 8th graders piled into this conference room. And all the girls, every single one, not one was left out, sat in circles on the floor, pulled out their lunch, and yapped. And I stood there and I thought, this is the best part of the field trip. Don't you remember? It was so fun to listen to them talk to each other. And then I looked at the boys. They came in, sat around the table that was in the center of the room, got out their lunches, got out their phones, and didn't say a word to each other. And I thought, you are missing out on the best part of the field trip. And I see that as they get older. I see that in Washington. I think, guys, you're missing out on the best part of the field trip. 3 women in a 10-minute conversation could solve 99% of the problems that we have today. And I hear that male loneliness epidemic conversation all the time. I have mixed feelings on it. I have 3 boys. I don't want them to get trapped into that. And I keep getting asked, well, what can I do? Well, I can't really do much. I'm doing as much as I can. Friendship is one of the most important things to me. I couldn't be married without my friends. Certainly not. I couldn't write without my friends. I couldn't mother without them. I couldn't breathe without them. And so I really prioritize that. I really prioritize them just as much as a marriage because I really couldn't do anything without them. And so I think I am being that example. It's up to the men in my life and in boys' lives to kind of show that vulnerability and reach outside their comfort zone, put down their phones on a field trip and look at each other and talk to each other. They're missing out on the best part of the field trip. And I do see some hope sometimes, but I also think there's a lot of work to do. I think for women, it's also biological. That's how we've survived from the beginning of humanity is gathering together and sharing with each other and raising our kids together. And I think there's so many benefits to that. And yeah, I feel like I'm on a friendship tour. I talk about this at every stop, but those female friendships are just so important to me. Sometimes I hear this from women. I'll hear, especially as we get older, I'll hear, it shouldn't be this hard about friendship. And I think, oh, honey, yes, it should be. Friendship takes a lot of energy and forgiveness and grace. I know it's a lot easier to sink down on the couch after a long, hard day and get stuck in the digital world and doom scroll. But the real stuff, the rich stuff is with each other. And I know you know that because you're out here tonight. Yeah.
We were talking backstage, and the problem is they put us together too early back there. So we were like getting into Trump and AI, and then I was like, we got to save some of this for the stage. We were
really yapping, yeah.
we were yapping. We had a good chat, but we were talking about the inconvenience of community. That community actually, it takes hard work. I mean, we obviously get benefits out of it, but your friends are going to irritate you. They're going to have a crisis, and it's not going to be coming at the best time for you. How many times can I talk
about youth soccer, you know? Yeah.
Right, so it's just, it takes work to have that community. In one of the poems in this book, you talk about how men come from women and women come from ourselves, which I thought was a great line. I think a really good example of how that trust and connection works between women is the cover of this book. So if you have Kate's new book in front of you, she is on the cover. That is her on the cover of this book.
Ever since I was a little girl, I just wanted to be naked on the front of a book I wrote. So I really fulfilled that dream.
I mean, first of all, congrats. You look great. What is so funny, I love the story of how this cover came to be, because essentially, as I understand it, a woman called you that you did not know out of the blue and wanted to come take your photo, and that cover is how it turned out. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, a photographer from Toronto, she was there at the event last night. She messaged me and said, I love your work. I'm a photographer. I would love to come take photos of you and maybe stay in your home. And I was like, she's either going to murder me or take some really beautiful pictures. And I thought, how about now? So she came and we over the span of 2 days, took a bunch of really beautiful photos. And when it was time for the cover process, we were kind of doing concepts, and I just happened to send a few. I said, maybe something like this of a woman floating in the water, and they just took the actual image, added some clouds. And yeah, that's how the cover came to be. But yeah, I really hesitated. I noticed this is the one book my in-laws don't have in their home. And I respect that, yeah.
Well, it has very Ophelia vibes, which is in the zeitgeist, I feel like, right now. And
I do think she copied me, but that's fine.
And I think you talked too that it's not, your vision for it is not that she's sinking, but she's breaking the surface, that she's rising.
That was a concern of mine, because you could look at it that she's sinking down into the water. But what I hope comes through in the book is that she's actually rising out, yeah.
So there's a poem from this book that really speaks beautifully to this idea of female connection, and I was wondering if you would mind reading, and I almost forgot it, and then I ran back and got the book for you, The Bridemaid Speech, which is on page 36.
Sure. The first time I read this poem out loud in front of an audience, two of my best friends who I absolutely wrote this poem for were sitting in the audience like this, looking at me, and I'm so glad they're not here tonight. It's very hard to get through. I think it's silly how we dedicate this 5 minutes, if you happen to get married, to pledge your love to our girlfriends, and how we have this like one chance, and often it's like maybe in our 20s when we haven't even met some of the great loves of our lives. That's why I wrote this. Oh shoot, I don't want to cry again, but I'm a huge crier. I'm sure I will tonight. That's why I wrote this, because like I said, we have such a focus on this romantic love, but when the platonic love is holding us up just as much in our lives, if not more. And I wanted a space to give the bridesmaid speech to the ones that I've met after the opportunity to say all of this. I have known her all her life. And by that I mean I've seen her in the impossible light of girlhood, the spaces in between, the car on the way to the birthday dinner, the moment before the photograph. I have stood outside the bathroom stall, held tight while her shoulders shook with sorrow. I've watched joy arrive, midnight and unexpected, repeated stories until they were my own. It's true there is a cost to this devotion, but I'll let you in on a little secret. There is very little women choose to keep from one another. How lucky are we to know a love like this? Thank you. It's so awkward to read poetry, and I'll tell you why. I don't know if any of you grew up in the church. Do you remember in offertory, a little 7-year-old boy would come and just play this beautiful piano piece, and then he would just sit down, and no one would clap, and you'd feel guilty about it for like the next 30 years, and you don't need to do that for me. You can clap or not clap, it's okay. Yeah.
It's okay. The applause gave me a moment to compose myself so that I didn't cry, and then I looked out and saw my sister was crying, and I was like,
nice.
Damn it.
Perfect.
You mentioned, I know you come from a religious background, as do I, and I want to touch on that in a little bit. But I was curious, especially seeing the cover, women from religious backgrounds are often taught to be ashamed of our bodies and have very complicated relationships, even more than women already do. And as writers, we also tend to live in our heads a little bit more. So I was curious, are there any things that you do that are helping you feel connected in your body or more physically present in your life instead of just mentally?
Yeah, I mean, it's really has been a struggle, especially in the last few years. I went through a midlife crisis at the very green age of 38. All of a sudden, I was having all these health complications that came out of nowhere and was really facing my own mortality. And I felt so disconnected from my body and so out of control, like, all of a sudden, I kind of felt like I was floating above myself, watching myself slowly decay. And that has been really difficult. I have been able to come back into myself in the last few years and last year, especially since turning 40, but that's been a struggle, and it has been a struggle my whole life, especially, I was in Mennonite schooling, kindergarten through college, so I was very much in that world, purity culture world, and just that very strange world where we are very policed, and I've really gone through different phases of that, although I do think no matter what, women, especially if you're born in America, have to go through these phases of feeling disconnected because we are told what we should and should not look like, should and should not do with our body. And that has been one of my favorite parts of turning 40, is kind of gaining back some of that control. I've just never felt more like myself, never felt more richer or fuller, and I've never felt more at home in myself, and it's been one of my favorite things about turning 40, and also, I think a huge theme in this book is kind of holding those two things, the good and the bad about getting older. The bad being, yes, our bodies fail us, we are mortal, things will happen that are unexpected and have to be dealt with, and also, gosh, what a great time. Someone asked me if I could stay any age forever, what would it be? And I said, 40. It's just, someone said at a different event a few weeks ago, turning 40 is like when your 5-year-old self and your 10-year-old self and your 15-year-old self and your 25-year-old self and your 33-year-old self, they all get to come out and play. And I love that. I feel so playful and just so much more loving to myself than I ever have before. And so, yeah, I do feel like it's kind of holding both of those things and trying to talk to myself gently and be at home in myself, because if I can't be at home within me, I really can't be at home anywhere, and it's been a hard lesson to learn, yeah.
I think, this idea of dealing with health anxiety and grappling with mortality is something that a lot of us deal with we're very similar in age at this point of our lives, and I think there can be positives about this process. You've spoken, and I want to quote something you said because I thought it was a great quote, how eye-opening it is to learn over and over that there is only this one precious life, and what a waste it is to use that life worrying about thigh gap or what some dude thinks about the feminine mystique, which I thought was great. I think, though, that there can be a grieving process in that, too, and just realizing how fragile and fleeting our lives can be. How do you handle that part of it, and does that come out in your writing at all?
I think looking and seeing and remembering those that have been in my life that haven't been lucky enough to get older, who have left this mortal world. Aging is such a privilege. Not all of us get to do it. I have a line, and I hope this finds you well, that says, how the dead must cringe at our resistance to grow older. And yeah, I think trying to hold on to that concept and remember that we're so lucky to be here. We have this one lifetime. This is not a dress rehearsal for a better life. It's just today. And yeah, I don't know if any of you have ever looked at someone and thought, oh, you're such an old soul. No one's ever said that to me before. I'm a really new soul. And I have to learn things the hard way over and over and over again. And that has absolutely been something that I have had to learn many times. Yeah.
I'm curious what role rage plays in your life right now. I feel like I have a lot of it. I think a lot of women here have a lot of it. We're in a culture right now where the way that we talk to and about women, the way that we talk about queer people, people of color, immigrants, has taken a giant step backwards, I think. And that is something that I struggle with on a daily basis. Is that true for you, and what are you doing with any rage that you might be dealing with?
I don't know if any of you have tried rage cleaning. It's really helpful. I have 4 kids. The house is a mess. So I do that, rage walks. I also really work a lot of that out through writing. I wrote an entire book, I hope this finds you well, really on the premise of rage, with erasure poetry. And so yeah, I think a lot of artists use art to kind of process the rage and try to really get to the root of it. There's a poem in all of my books, and in this one, about gun violence. It's something that, an issue that's really affected my life, and that it has given me a lot of anxiety. Every time I put my kids on the bus, I think, will I see you again? There's a poem in here about the active shooter drill. Do you do that in Michigan, the active shooter drills? I don't know, in Pennsylvania, we get a letter home every time we practice that drill. Do you get a letter? Email, okay. When I was writing this book, during that time, my 7-year-old, in his folder, I was cleaning out all the art, and I came across one of those forms that was just letting parents know that they practiced that active shooter drill that day. And I pulled it out, and I was about to toss it in the trash with all of his art. Sorry. He's my fourth. I'm like, I'm not keeping anything else. And I was about to toss it in the trash, just very cavalierly, like, oh yeah, they did this today. And I stopped myself, and I thought, I don't ever want to be numb to this. I don't ever want to normalize this. This is absolutely not something my first graders should be practicing at school. This is not a reality that I want to get comfortable with or ever let myself settle it into any sort of normalcy. And I used that form then to create a piece in here. And so, yeah, I don't really remember the question, but I think about rage. Yeah, I think working it out through art is definitely been something that's been helpful for me. Yeah.
I'm curious what your DMs look like, because when you write a poem like this, and you also do your erasure poetry, you just did one recently with some of Megyn Kelly's comments about Epstein and turned it into a really beautiful piece. So for people who don't know what the erasure poetry is, she takes something that's usually misogynistic and terrible and removes enough words from it that a poem is left behind. And it's really, I think, cathartic to see how that transformation happens. When you're writing about something like school shootings or writing about these topical issues, I'm sure, and I know because I see your social media, there are so many women who, and people of all genders who are resonating with what you're talking about, these topical issues. But I imagine you might get some backlash too. It's like, how does that response usually look like for you?
Yeah, I think that's for anyone who has an active presence on the internet that's happening. People keep asking if I'm in retirement from those erasure poems. It's not that. It's that if you want to send me a mean, ugly message, what I need you to do is really use more nouns. Creative adjectives, adverbs. I can't do much with I hate your fucking suit. Tell me why. You don't like this? I really need you to be descriptive. That is a really hard part of erasure poetry, is if I'm not creating the sourced material, I really have to work with what's given to me. So actually, that's the hardest part. That was the hardest part, besides reading through all those messages, was trying to find ones that had the right language to be able to create a poem from it. So yeah, I find that kind of poetry to be very playful and very fun, but also difficult when the sourced material is so full of hatred. But it's very cathartic to create something else from it, and I do think that is an art form that I'll continue to pursue. I'm not sure if the sourced material will be messages, because like I said, I put together that book going through 10 years of messages, emails, DMs, blog comments. So yeah, I don't think there'll be another book from that kind of source material. There's a few poems in here that are erasures. One is from a piece from Alice in Wonderland. There's another from a page of a failed novel that I wrote, and so those were really fun. Yeah, I love that art form, and I hope to keep doing that.
Does that develop a muscle in you? Like, even as someone who reads it, it develops it in me, but like, does that help you when you then encounter something terrible or misogynistic to already start thinking creatively of like how you can subvert that?
Absolutely, yeah. Once I started, I couldn't stop. So that's why it's been in every book since, and I do. It's like a little party trick. They're really fun to write for the most part. But again, please use nouns, interesting nouns. Yeah.
So I just want to talk a little bit about your background as a poet. It seems like you had at least the writing bug from a young age. You've talked about writing poems about your cats as a kid. You graduated college with an English degree. Your first book, What Kind of Woman in 2020, which is a big bestseller, and then you've had several more bestsellers since then. You've been called an Instagram poet. I don't know if you like that term or not, but I'm curious like how your voice, like as opposed to like structured poetry or rhyming poetry, like how has this more kind of conversational style of yours emerged?
Yeah, I think most writers write what they want to read, and so that's really, if you're talking about style, that's where that's come from. Yeah, but like you said, I've always written poetry. I'm a huge nostalgia hoarder, and recently my parents asked me to come get all my crap out of their attic as I'm 40 years old. And so I brought home these huge bins to look through, and I found all my old journals, and that's where I found that poetry that started when I was 8 years old. I was writing about all my dead cats. They just kept getting hit on the road. Yeah, huge bummer poems. And then I found all the poetry I wrote when I was 16, really horny. And all the poems I wrote when I was in college, again, and really bad stuff, but I was like, oh, I've always been doing this. I've always been a poet. I think I didn't share a poem with anyone until I was 35 years old. It took me that long, but I had been writing it since I'd been 8 years old. Because I thought that a poet had to look a certain way and act a certain way and maybe wear a tweed jacket and walk along a shoreline smoking a pipe and be a man in grad school whose girlfriend is supporting him. So, and then I kind of was opened up to a new world, and you know, I stand on the backs of so many incredible female poets, Sharon Olds, Wanda Coleman, Margaret Atwood, just incredible poets. So I really find inspiration through them, and also fiction writers as well. There's so much poetry in all genres, in fiction and nonfiction and essays, and in the writing that you do is also poetry. I really find it everywhere, and I find inspiration from all those places.
I do not think the readers in my comment section agree with that, but that's okay.
Well, I say that, yeah.
That's sweet of you to say. Well, one of the things I like that you talked about that, because we have folks in the audience who I'm sure would like to write poetry or do themselves or write or do any kind of creative artistic endeavor, is that you talked about just learning to find inspiration in the everyday things. You don't have to sit down and be like, I'm going to write my masterpiece today. It's like, what is happening around me when I'm waiting in line at the grocery store? Like, what is this interaction between this cashier and this customer? So maybe just talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you look for that just in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, the meat of my poems, the heartbeat of everything I write really comes from my regular, daily, in real life, not in the office, but yeah, in the grocery store, at the post office, when I'm with my friends, when I'm with my kids. There's a line in one of my poems that says, I love my life except for the noise of it. And I wrote those lines. Does anyone here have a bad dog? Yeah, okay, I see you. I have a bad dog. And the only way she's not bad is if we take her for these long field walks every day. I live in the country, and we bump up against farmland, so we take her in those fields to free run every evening. And I was coming back from one of those one evening, and I was walking along the front of my house, and I looked in our big bay window, and I saw my daughter sitting at the piano, playing the piano, and I saw my youngest on the floor playing magna tiles, and my other two playing a card game with my husband. And I thought, oh, they're so beautiful. I don't want to go inside. And that's when those lines came to me, and I quickly emailed myself. And I'm doing that all the time, emailing myself, texting myself. My notes app is such a cluster, but quickly trying to put down lines in there, writing things down on pieces of paper and shoving it under my office door. So that's really where the meat of the poems come from. And then it's in those dedicated office hours where I really do the construction and the hard part, the writing part, trying to put those together into something cohesive and coherent, and pontificate about commas and rip my hair out and put my butt in the chair, as Anne Lamott says. And yeah, that's where the real writing comes in, but the meat of the poems absolutely comes from my real life. That's what I love about poetry, is it's listed in the fiction section, so you can say whatever you want, but everything is absolutely true.
Yeah. Well, I have heard you talk about that you often feel like you are in fact the narrator of a lot of your poetry, right? And you've talked about writing by ear, that sometimes like a word or a line will hit your ear in kind of a certain musical way. An example from this book is, first of all, the title of this poem is called "You Used to Text Me Nudes, but Now It's Just for Information for Our Taxes," which I thought was such a great title. The last line of that poem is, "Lift your mouth to the horn and call me back to you." And that was an example that you've shared of how that musicality hits you. Like, what does that process look like of trying to get to the right harmony for the words in your poems?
Yeah, I really write by ear. I sound like a nut in my office because I just repeat what I'm writing out loud over and over until it sounds right, which is really frustrating because often the language and the actual words I want to use that convey what I want to say don't sound right, so I have to find something else. But yeah, that poem, there's probably 5 or 6 poems that I've written in my entire life that were written in 10 minutes, and it is just the joy of a lifetime to sit down and write something and have it sound right the first time. When I wrote those words, lift your mouth to the horn and call me back to you, I heard the angels sing that 4-part chord. I was like, oh, that's what I want to say, and I got to say it the first time. I had to read that poem in front of my dad at my second stop, so that was fun. Yeah.
I had to laugh while I was doing research for this interview about how many times you've been asked if poetry is dying or dead.
Yeah.
I want to just quote an answer you said to that because I thought it was great. You said, "There's always been art, there's always been poetry since the beginning of language. Terrible things have happened, plagues, wars, civilizations destroyed. But art is always there and always will be there until, I guess, we're wiped off the planet."
I don't remember saying that. That's
it's not going anywhere, even if it's sometimes hard to find. We talked about this a little bit backstage. Clearly people are finding your poetry. You've had several bestsellers. You have a great Instagram following. Do the ways that people find you keep changing, and do you have to keep adjusting your approach, given that poetry isn't always front and center in our culture right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think just the way we consume all art is constantly changing. I remember when I first started putting poetry on Instagram in 2019, maybe late 2018, there was a big cultural criticism of any art being on Instagram. It was kind of like, well, now anyone can be a stand-up comic, or anyone can be a singer-songwriter, or anyone can be a poet. And I was like, yeah, isn't that great? You don't have to have a dad in the industry. I don't see any problem with that. If you don't like it, don't follow. Yeah, I think it's really made poetry much more accessible. There's an Instagram account called Poetry is Not a Luxury, if you don't follow it. Yeah, which is a quote by Audre Lorde, one of the greatest poets of our time. And that account shares poetry from all genders, all eras, all voices, all forms, and is a wonderful way to find poetry. I hear all the time, I could never read poetry, I could never understand it, I never liked it. And to me, that's like saying I've never liked music. You just haven't heard the right song. Even if it's not mine, it certainly might not be. There's really poetry for everyone, just like there's music for everyone. And the way we find it, yeah, of course that's going to change. Instagram is so different now than it was when I was first putting out my work there. Now we're really being served a lot of rage bait. Our algorithms are designed to keep us angry, and also scrolling on 10-second videos of golden retrievers, like looking for those tennis balls in the pool. That's cute, but it's really prioritized over static posts like poetry. So I'm not sure where you'll find it, but I think humanity has always found a way. Yeah.
I mean, when we were talking backstage, we were talking about how people's attention span is changing so much, and even like Instagram now, it's moving towards reels. So, you know, a static poem isn't getting the kind of attention that it used to. And then we sort of extrapolated into the future about how maybe no one will pay attention to art, and then we got really quiet and sad in the green room. And then we're like, let's bring it back to like, people are always gonna love art. Like, it's always gonna find a way to come through somehow. And you mentioned you don't know if you'll stay on Instagram or if you'll move to something else, but it seemed like you felt relatively confident that there is a really essential need for art, that even as we're grappling with AI and everything else, that need is always in humans. Like you felt, it seemed like you felt optimistic about that.
I do. I think the pendulum will really swing the other way. I think we're hungry for not AI images already, and even though it's just now starting, it will get old really fast. It's really slop. It's like eating McDonald's every day. It's funny, you know, sometimes to watch a bear put on a ballerina costume, and I guess, yeah, I guess there could be some funny things about videos and art made through AI. But I think after you consume it for a while, it starts to feel really empty, because what art needs is humans. It needs the humanity. That's why we connect with art, is because it has that human heartbeat. And without it, it's just empty calories. And so, yeah, I do feel hopeful, because humans can't survive on empty calories. And I think we'll always return to what's true.
As someone who moderates comment sections on a daily basis, I really appreciated the poem Age of the Internet in this book, which is just one line. We know too little about too much to form these manifestos.
Yeah, I really thought that summed things up. Yeah.
I just want to copy and paste that to everyone in the comment section now every day. I just thought that was really great. But I mean, I imagine, this is true for myself, and you've hinted a little bit here, but we were talking a little bit, but like your relationship with being online, I imagine, is complicated. You have children, and we talked about, having, tablets are very helpful babysitters on long road trips, but how are you finding that balance for you and your family of being on screens versus not? You just took a trip this year, right, where you practiced this, took them off the screens.
Yeah, we took a 2-week road trip up the coast to Acadia, Maine, and no one, including me, we didn't bring any devices. And it was, I really had this expectation that I would come home feeling very holier than thou than everyone in my life. I did not come home feeling like that. I came home feeling very humbled at how much we rely on these things, and it was a very difficult trip. It was wonderful. We made a lot of great memories, but it's really hard to rally a teenager and also a middle schooler and a 9-year-old and a first grader waiting in line 2 hours for Sally's Pizza in Connecticut without any devices. Played a lot of Skippo. Did a lot of fighting. Really fought with each other. But it was also really wonderful. Yeah, I have no advice on really anything, but especially with parenting. I don't give parenting advice. I don't really take parenting advice. There's so many factors into everyone's situation. I do think that children on social media will age very similarly to giving babies juice in bottles. I just don't think that makes sense. Yeah, but I don't have advice, and I have no wonderful, beautiful thought on it, except that it's really hard. Yeah.
I don't have children myself, but I do have 4 nieces and nephews, 2 of whom are here tonight, 2 of my nieces. I love some of the lines you've written about motherhood. In New Soul, which is in this book, you wrote, "My children ask why I make so many mistakes, and I don't have the heart to tell them this is my first rodeo just as much as it is theirs." I also died at Comedy Routine, and I wondered if you might be willing to read it. It's on page 6.
Yeah, this is called Comedy Routine. Some women will say the happiest day of their life was when their child was born. And I think, lady, when my son was born, I ripped from V to A. I couldn't shit without calling the police. The happiest day of my life was when I was at a foot spa, getting a pedicure. The woman doing my feet got into some gossip with the lady sitting beside her. She got so distracted, she rubbed my legs for half an hour. That was the best day of my life. That's a true story.
You said at one point you spent several years not writing about motherhood before realizing, oh, it's okay to do that. Were you afraid of being dismissed or not taken seriously in some way if you wrote about being a mother, which, by the way, is one of the most universal experiences on earth and shouldn't be disqualifying as a poet? But how were you thinking about it? How were you made to feel about it?
I was really, really tired of being called a mommy writer. I was doing a lot of nonfiction essays about motherhood for places like Huffington Post, and whenever I was referenced online, I was called a mommy writer, and I was just really tired of it. I realize now I was internalizing that misogyny. The story of taking that break is much longer than just that, but I did take a break for 4 years to write about something else. But I returned to motherhood because, yes, it is. Everyone comes from a mother, whether you know her or not, whether you like her or not. We all come from a mother. It is the most universal experiences in the world. I don't know how many of you have read a coming-of-age story about baseball. I know I have been forced to read those many times. That's certainly not universal, but the concept of motherhood and mothers is, and it did take me a long time, once again, to learn that lesson, yeah.
I want to ask you about your Mennonite upbringing, which you mentioned a little bit earlier. You described this as similar to other kids' experience with 90s Christian culture, which was entirely my world. And you said that these weren't the Mennonites wearing coverings and dresses. These were mainstream Mennonites wearing Abercrombie & Fitch with nice cars and generational farm wealth. I've gotten the impression that your relationship to church and faith has changed as you've gotten older. What does that look like for you today?
On my last book tour, someone stood up and gave the most poignant she made this point that she felt like so much of what I wrote felt inspired by the Bible, and some of those stories, and just the musicality of the Bible is a big poem. And I've thought about that so much, and how much that Bible memory and all those verses really influenced me. There's some incredible poetry in the Bible. Whether you believe it's true or not, I'm somewhere in between. And yeah, it has really been a huge influence in my life. I realized after she told me what an influence that has been in my life, just the actual scripture and the poetry of that. Being raised in 90s Christian culture is really a mixed bag. There's a lot of comedy in there that I could share. There's also a lot of heartache and a lot of things that have needed to be deconstructed and kind of torn apart and rebuilt. I'll defend Mennonites to my dying day, but I can absolutely shit talk them myself since I was in that culture for so long. They are peacemakers. And some really wonderful people, but there's also a lot of complicated stuff in there, and I think I'm still working that out. I absolutely believe in God. I've seen her, I know her, and just really happy to be in that space now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think this is a topic that's gotten more fraught maybe in recent years as politics and different faiths have gotten more intertwined. We were talking about a little bit this backstage. I thought you shared some really I thought heartfelt sentiment. So I wonder if we could just revisit that conversation, which is just how we engage with people in our lives in this really polarized climate who might believe differently from us politically, faith-wise, whatever it is. How have you sort of landed on negotiating, maintaining your values and morality and trying to maintain relationships with others who might be really challenging or really different from where you're coming from?
I really compare it to the Instagram therapy advice that we've been given for the last decade, which is if someone is toxic, you should cut them out of your life. That kind of like black and white notion that, oh my goodness, if they're toxic, you just cut them out. I'm like, man, we're all toxic, so I'm not sure that's a really good approach. I love that meme that says the worst person you know is in therapy right now, being told that that they're right. It's like, I don't know. I think it's very easy to get stuck in our echo chambers, just talking about the same issues to each other and just agreeing with each other in our little tiny bubbles without seeing the rest of the world. I'm certainly guilty of that. It was really difficult in COVID, I know, for so many of us to be stuck in those bubbles, only talking to each other and pointing fingers at everyone else. It's why we can't win an election. It's why we get really stuck in these nitty-gritty details instead of just sitting down and listening. I'm not saying that you need to sit down at Thanksgiving dinner with your racist uncle and be like, I know those immigrants, what are we gonna do? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is your uncle is never gonna hear a different perspective if we are separated and don't show up to Thanksgiving at all. And I don't have the answers here, but what I do know is that if we just reject anyone in our life that we don't agree with, we'll never solve anything. And I wish I had a better, clearer answer here, but I do know that the answer can't be cut out everyone in your life that you don't agree with. That will solve nothing.
Yeah, and what we talked about backstage, this is really hard, and I just want to stand it for just a moment because I know so many people here in this political climate, are really struggling with this. First of all, we had the disclaimer that this isn't necessarily applying to cutting narcissistic or abusive people.
If you have a narcissistic relative who's like torturing you, please cut them out of your life. Yeah.
We wanted to be clear about that. There's certainly times where that estrangement is warranted. But even I was, asking you, it's challenging when some of these issues are really deeply rooted in our own values and morals. We want to be clear about that with the people in our lives that we love. We also want to make sure the vulnerable people in our lives know that we're their allies and we're sticking up for them. And so we were just trying to wrestle with if you don't cut them out, what is the best way to engage? And it sounded like we were kind of landing on, you got to keep the conversation front and center, because sometimes people will just pretend nothing's wrong, we just won't talk about politics, but that can be stifling as well. Well,
it's such a privilege to say we're not going to talk about politics. I really look to the peacemakers of our time, Miss Rachel, who's doing such an incredible job saying, I love everyone, I don't want anyone to be persecuted for their faith or their background, but let's not kill kids. I think that's a great place to start at a Thanksgiving table, at a Christmas table, I really am looking to those leaders in our country and in our world who really stand a firm line and hold on to their values and say, this is wrong, this is not okay, the way our government is behaving is not okay. But also having a listening ear, because it's really, there's not a black and white way to deal with those people in our lives that we disagree with. And that's what I'm pushing up against, that Instagram therapy advice, that's what I'm pushing up against. That there has to be some nuance here. There has to be a way to come together. I think we can agree with a lot more than we think with those around us. Really, it should be us against the billionaires. They're the ones who's controlling all of us and hurting all of us, no matter where you fall in the political spectrum. And I really think we need to come together on those topics. Yeah. Thank you.
So I was going to ask you about some of the other kind of poets and writers that you love. You mentioned Margaret Atwood earlier. I think we have a shared love of Mary Oliver. And you had talked, I think, about doing mental health walks, being outside in nature. I know that was obviously something that was big to Mary. So I was curious, how that has been going for you. When you walk, are you writing? Are you thinking? Are you listening to music? How does that work for you?
Yeah, sometimes I'm listening to Cardi B. Other times I'm talking to my friends. I do a lot of that on my walks. I use Marco Polo or Voxer. Really highly recommend those apps. They should really be paying me at this point because I keep bringing them up. A lot of the poetry comes on those walks. I do a ton of reading for my mental health. I don't know if any of you read The Road to Tender Hearts. I'm a major evangelist for this book. I met Annie in Boston. She's incredible. That book is poetry. Heart the Lover by Lily King, that recently came out. That book is also poetry. I really love to get lost in fiction. There's so much humanity in books like that. Martyr is another one that I've loved recently. I have an Instagram account, Bear Books, where I write all these down, so you don't need to try to write in the dark. But I think those reading and walking are the two things that have helped me the most mentally and also creatively. Yeah.
I was going to mention your Instagram account. You have yours, of course, but then the Bear Books. If you're looking for these book recommendations or things she's talking about, there's a lot of good book recommendations on there. You've talked about finding your book type or recommending that people find a book type so they know what they would read next. What is your book type? How does someone find what their book type is?
Yeah, I'm a real lit fic girly, but I read everything. I obviously read a lot of poetry, but I also read nonfiction. And it's also how I write in general. In my office, I always have a book open in my lap. Often it's Lauren Groff's Fates and Furies. It's one of the best books I've ever read. she has such a way with language and storytelling and complex female characters. But I love lit fic. I think finding I don't want you to get stuck in one genre, though. There's so many incredible writers out there that you might not know about if you're only reading romantasy. It's okay to be reading that, but there are other things. Poetry and like I said, nonfiction. The next book I want to read is Everything is Tuberculosis by,
it's so good.
So good,
it's really good.
I don't read a ton of nonfiction, but I've heard so much about this. And so, I really try to push myself to read all genres,
Tell me about Amish romance novels.
I really got stuck in that. Like I said, I grew up in a Mennonite schooling. My mom worked there, so I was able to go there for free. And there wasn't much in the library. So I really read a lot of Amish romance, really weird stuff in there. It wasn't until I got to high school that a high school English teacher, her name was Mrs. McTavish, incredible woman, she gave me The Edible Woman by Margaret Atwood. That book completely blew my life apart. I read every book of hers after that in high school. I still continue to read every book of hers because her storytelling is so incredible, and the way that she's able to capture humanity is just really unique and wonderful. So Margaret Atwood really broke my spell of the Amish romance vibe.
Music seems to be important to you as well. You had a Spotify playlist that you created for this book, which I thought was really cool. What made you want to do that? What's on it? How does that playlist really reflect what the book is?
I've done that with all my books. So every book I've written, I have a playlist for it. I actually have a playlist for everything. I really don't like mouth sounds, so I have a playlist for sex, for dinner, for the car, really for anything where I can hear anyone's body. I just cannot hear chewing, man. So that's part of why I always have music on, but also music, it's something that poetry, stand-up comedy, songs, all of those things are very related. It's trying to tell a big story in a short amount of time. And so I'm very much drawn to music, to comedy, to poetry because of that boiled down storytelling and really trying to get at the heart of something is something that I've always been really drawn to.
Can you give some examples of what's on the How About Now playlist, and maybe also what's on your sex playlist? I think some people in the audience want to know.
Again, Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion. The How About Now playlist is all over the place, but the first song I put on there was a song called My Ego Dies at the End by Jensen McRae. It's an incredible song about ego and a topic I really tried to tackle in this book in my own life, just pulling apart that concept of ego and realizing how much it controls in our relationships and in our worlds. And I love that song.
We just have a couple questions here to wrap up, and then we're going to open it up to you guys to ask questions as well as the live stream. If you have any mobility challenges, we do have a roving mic that can come around the auditorium as well as a stationary mic up here. So start thinking about your questions that you'd like to ask Kate. We're going to go to those in just a few minutes. I just have a couple more questions for you. I'm always interested when people are into personality tests, horoscopes, whatever. I don't know how true any of these things are, but I do like the Enneagram. I'm a hardcore 8 challenger. You're a 4, I believe.
So it's the worst one. Yeah.
It is not. My sister's a 4, and she's the best person I know. So tell me about, I guess, just for people who don't know, what's kind of defining 4 about you? What does a 4 say about Kate?
4s are poets, 4s are sappy, 4s are a bummer. We always want to talk about how this might be the last time we ever do something. And then write about it and make everyone read it and go on a book tour about it. So 4s love to cry. I'm a huge crier. I cry at everything. I cry at a marching band. I cry at the grocery store when a little old lady can't get her cat food down from the top shelf and someone else helps her and I'm like, look at them. I cried today at the airport at a service dog. I almost thought the owner was going to ask if I was okay because tears were just streaming down my face. I was like, he's such a good boy. That really sums up what it's like to be a 4. Yeah, I'm married to a 5, which is a really terrible pairing, and inspired a piece. Actually, someone came up to me at my Chicago event and said, can I ask you a question about the poem, The Romantic Marries a Tree? And I said, sure. And she said, are you a 4 and is your husband a 5? And I'm like, that son of a bitch was astute. I'm like, yes, that is exactly what that poem is about. You really know the Enneagram, and also me. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, a couple quick lightning questions. First of all, you've hinted at unfinished novels. Do you think you will write a novel at some point?
Oh, absolutely. I write all genres. I've written a bunch of screenplays, short stories, novels. I love to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. I think poetry will always follow me home. I think I'll be writing poetry, I hope, until my last days. But yeah, I'm always trying different genres, and I love fiction. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I have kind of these 2 hats I wear: my writing hat and then my circus monkey hat. You can see which one I am right now. I always long for the one that I'm not in. So I keep thinking, oh, in January, I put my writing hat back on, and I get to do all that, taking risks and trying out different art and seeing what comes out. But I'll miss you when I'm there, yeah.
You mentioned this is the last stop of your tour. You had a pretty intensive tour, and you have had tours for other bookstores. Do you have any favorite traditions, routines that help keep you sane while you're on tour?
I like to leave the TV on in the hotel room, so when I come back, it feels cozy. Aww. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. What about any TV shows, films that you're into right now, especially ones that make you laugh or help you relax or unwind?
And right now I'm rewatching 30 Rock, which is truly one of the greatest comedies that have ever been on TV. It's so funny. I would love to know what like a Gen Z would think watching it, because it's so specific to when it came out, but it's just ripe for me, an elder millennial. Yeah.
And then what comes next for you after this tour? I mean, you've got holidays, I assume, but do you have any things in the next year? Like, what are you going to be? Are you working on another book? Like, what do you think kind of the next year looks like for you?
Yeah, like I said, I think it'll just be that trying to see what comes next. I could have never predicted that I would write a poetry book in 2019, and so I really try not to trap myself into one thing. Like I said, I think poetry will absolutely be something that comes again, but yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm excited to find out what's next.
Okay, great. So as we go to questions, I felt like it would be fitting to ask you to read the title poem of the book, How About Now?
This is called How About Now? We are born dying, which is one way to look at it. Another is to wake up knowing we are made of impossible things. Crystal caves, singing dunes, dark matter held in mortal hope. It's true, time has a way of making lists and ledgers. You say you want a garden, beds of lavender and daffodils. You say we have a lifetime. Love, we're in our lifetime. How about now?
Thank you, Kate.
It's so nice to see you.
There everybody is. So we're going to open up to audience questions. If anyone has a question, please come up to the microphone here, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we can bring a mic to you as well. We've got one roving back there. Don't be shy. As you can tell, Kate is happy to answer any question.
I'll talk about anything. I've really said some things on these book tours during the Q&A, so you really can ask me anything.
For sure. Testing, thank you. I know for sure we have a question in the back, so follow me back here to Susan with Michigan Writers. I can always rely on her for a question.
Thank you, Kendall. Welcome to Traverse City, Kate from Michigan Writers. We're so glad you're here, and you have so many. The whole audience is a kindred spirit with you. How did you break through? We've got a lot of people in the audience that would like to put out a book of poetry or get something published. Can you give us your ideas?
Do you want the long version or the short version? I'll give a medium. I think it's really important to understand that when you see an author with success, that has always been so much failure behind that. Like I said, I didn't share a poem until I was 35 with anyone else. I spent 4 years working on a novel that never went anywhere, which I think sounds crazy to a lot of people who maybe aren't in the arts, but makes perfect sense to me. I learned so much during that time. I call it my slightly less expensive MFA program. I did get into the MFA program, actually, of my choice in my 20s. The same week my husband got into med school, we were both ready for a career change. I graduated as an English major, which translates to graduating to be an office administrator or working at the dentist. We were both ready for a change. 2 weeks after that, I found out I was pregnant. One of those job paths pays, and one of them doesn't. And so I stayed home with our kids. Some of the best years of my life. But it was during that time, I had my 4th baby. I was in an accident, and I mentioned that because I truly did not mean to have 4. It was a really difficult time. I really struggled with depression that entire pregnancy. I struggled with postpartum depression very intensely after that, and it became apparent to myself during that time that we were either all going to sink or I had to put on my own life vest. And that's what I did. I put on my life vest. I went back to work. We had no money for childcare, so I started to do a bunch of freelance jobs to pay for childcare. I edited a 700-page romance novel from a man in Arizona. It was very evident from page 1 that he had never met a woman. That's not how it works, man. I don't know. But I did that so that I could write. That's when I worked on the novel. It's also when I started to really work on poetry and get a book deal for poetry. And so yeah, my path was not traditional, but it took that muscle of failing over and over again. And also, this is writing advice. First of all, I want to say before I get to that, not a single word, not a single page, not a single book of mine would be possible without childcare. It is the single most important factor in all of my books. But the writing advice I'd like to give, I only have one piece of writing advice, and that is nobody cares if you're a writer. Not your husband, not your wife, not your kids, not your parents, not your dentist, not your neighbor, not your friends. They might support you. They might say, yeah, you should write a book, but they don't care if you're a writer. You really have to care. And that is a lesson I had to learn the hard way. That's kind of having to learn that lesson, having to fail a bunch of times, having to be in one of the darkest mental spaces of my life really pushed me into finding my voice and being able to take my work into the next level. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, it does.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Kate, were you just putting your poems out there and building an audience, or how did you get an audience and a publisher?
Yeah, I'd already had an agent. A few of my pieces on motherhood had gone viral on Huffington Post, and so I had an agent, and with her, that's when that's what I was saying earlier, it was kind of complicated. That's when I decided to step away from writing about motherhood, and I worked on a thriller for 4 years with her, and I started cheating on that with poetry, and shared some stuff online that did really well and really connected with people, and ended up really working, focusing on poetry after that. Yeah.
Okay, more audience questions? There's
We have one.
Yep.
I found one. Here we go. Back here.
Hi. I was curious as a parent of a kindergartner and 6th grader, and also not wanting to normalize the shelter-in-place drills. What do you say to your children?
About the active shooter drills, just that I'm sorry that they have to do it. I'm an active member of Ceasefire for Pennsylvania and Moms Demand Action, so I think I've taken them to those marches. I've really tried to be an active participant in working towards gun reform laws, and so I guess that there's not really much to say to them beyond that. It's so out of my control. beyond what I can, those small steps that I can take. But yeah, it's a very difficult topic for all of us. Honestly, not one that I love to discuss with them, or even in general. Those are the only poems of mine I never read at events because they're too difficult for me to get through. So yeah, it's a really tough topic and one I wish I did not have to discuss with them. Yeah, thanks for the question.
More questions? You can raise your hand and Kendall will bring one around. Oh yeah, yep, come on up.
Okay. So Maggie Smith talks a lot about her relationship with her kids and the things that they'll read about themselves someday. And I know you have a pretty lovely poem that talks about wanting to split your life when it comes to sharing things with your family. Will you talk a little bit about how you feel about that, what your kids and your husband have read, and what that's like for you?
Sure, yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah. Maggie Smith actually edited this novel. She's a huge mentor of mine and a huge inspiration for me, and a really wonderful, real deal person. Yeah, my kids read Dogman. I don't know. They're not necessarily reading a ton of my poetry. There's so many poems dedicated to them that I do hope they find themselves in there when they're older. I'm sure they scan it for like bad words and sex. I'm sure they're doing that, but I don't think they're spending time like analyzing the lines. They're like, what's for dinner, you know? I do try to keep them out of the work in some ways and just try to tell my perspective. I get asked this a lot, like, you know, are there boundaries about what you write about? You know, I'm sure my high school son does not want me writing poems about his changing body. That's not something I think, yeah, so I really try to protect them in that way. I don't share a lot about them online just because that's their life to live, and so I really do try to protect them. I don't protect my husband at all. I have a stage 3 prolapse. My rectum's in the wrong place because of him and his children, so I write about anything with him. He's totally on limits. I don't censor myself at all with him. He's a chill guy, it's okay. I too am an open book. Anne Lamott, to bring her back into this, she says, write as if your parents are dead. I try to really hold on to that. I mean, my in-laws live 15 minutes away, so it's hard to forget that sometimes, and my parents are still, thank goodness, still alive. I dedicated this book to them. But I really have to try to push out those, you know, maybe those criticisms or voices when I'm writing and really just tell the truth no matter what. Yeah, the only people I'm really trying to protect, are those close to me, and really just try to tell my side of things, and try to tell the truth, but leave them out of it. Yeah, thanks for asking.
More questions?
They're really making your work coming up here to the mic. Thank you for getting those. Yeah.
And if you're not asking a question because you don't want to make the 1,000-mile walk to the mic up here, you can put your hand up and we'll bring one to you. I see one over here. Go ahead.
So I'm curious. I write poetry to try to figure out what the hell's going on with me.
Yeah.
And it started when my mom died.
Yeah.
So how do you get from kind of that way of using poetry to making it good?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of things in my life. I have a folder in my Google Drive called Poetry Grave of a lot of things that I still haven't worked out. So I think that's a difficult part of writing is you're always kind of circling the drain of what you're really feeling and what's really happening in your life. And it's hard for me sometimes to tell the truth and to really say how I'm feeling. I really have to confront the ego over and over again. That's hard for me. I think it's hard for a lot of us. But what I've found is to avoid saying what I really feel or what I really want to say just ends up writing some real commercial, washed out poetry that no one really wants to read because that's not the real stuff. We want the real stuff. We want the heart of something, which is also the art that I try to consume, music, any kind of art. And so I really do my best to write what's really there, what I don't want to say. But there are definitely topics, especially topics around grief, that are difficult to get to because I'm still trying to figure out what I'm grieving, and I think that's a process in art, and I hope to keep working on some of those things as I get older, and can kind of cover everything as I'm processing them. Yeah, it's a great question.
She has a great newsletter, by the way, if you sign up for it, and she talks as honestly about everything from your pelvic floor to what's going on with motherhood as honestly she does in her poems, and it's very funny.
Yeah, if you really want to read more about my rectum, I have like 1,000 words on it. It's a tough spot to be in. Hi.
Hi. Wow. Hi. I have two. One is quick, and if I may ask it as I would if I were shoulder to shoulder with you in a bar, which is, girl, where did you get your jumpsuit?
Oh my gosh, Nordstrom.
It's beautiful. It's been sparkling in the eyes the whole time. The second question that I have is regarding voice. It was interesting to hear you describe some of the poets you're familiar with in a tweed jacket. It feels similarly. I like poetry, but the first time I ever really cried at a poem was Ideal Heaven. I love that one. I think it was funny because I had one of those like blast out of your nose, and then I was like crying. So really love that poem. I was wondering if you could speak a bit to how your voice developed. Like, have you always had this beautiful, resonant, kind of like funny bit, or did that come with time?
Thank you. First of all, that is one of my favorite poems I've ever read, and no one has ever brought it up to me, so you are making my night. Thank you for saying that. Like I said, those journals were really telling. There was a lot of really bad stuff in there. I also continue to write some really bad stuff. I think that flexing that muscle of failing over and over, and you have to write a lot of bad things to get to the good things, or the things at least that I feel confident in, or I feel like are my voice. And so I think the only way to get there is through failing over and over again, and practicing that muscle and pushing past that fear of failing. I try to say this at events too. People always ask me like, well, how do you put yourself out there? Isn't it embarrassing? It is so embarrassing. It's so cringy to share poetry, of course, but you know what's so much more embarrassing is to get to the end of your life and never try. And I really have to tell myself that over and over again, that yes, it's going to be bad sometimes. Yes, it's not going to look good. Yes, you might try to write a novel or a screenplay or a short story or a poem, and it might really suck, but that's okay. That's the only way to get to the good parts. So yeah, thank you.
We have time for just a couple more questions. Kendall, I think there was one up here.
I can do it. I can make it.
I like to make
She's a hustler, baby.
She's very fast.
Hi, you opened up the evening talking about female friendships, and outside of my marriage, female friendships have been the most influential, my greatest heartbreaks as well. And I'm really interested, as you've hit 40, and how your female friendships inform not just your work, but your life as a mother, as a friend, as a daughter. What does that look like for you now? Like, how are you incorporating these into your life, and what does that look like?
Constant communication all day long. Really prioritizing spending time with them. We're all so busy. We all are driving to youth soccer. But making time for each other, despite being tired, has been something that's been really important to me and really important to them. It can also be really heartbreaking. And I think that's something we don't talk about. It's okay to have heartbreak over friends. It's okay to mourn them. It's okay for it to be hard. I read something somewhere that said, you haven't met all the people you will love in your life. I love that sentiment. I love knowing that I could still meet beautiful women. Forget about men. Hopefully not any more men. One's good enough. There's still so much life to live. There's still so many more people to meet and love, and just to be open to that and live my life in a way to be open to more love and relationship, and allow friendships to change. It's okay if they change. It's okay if they get deeper. It's okay if they get less deep. Sometimes that just happens. It's okay. It doesn't need to be so personal. Sometimes people grow apart, and that's okay. It makes room for someone new. That's hard for me. As a 4, like I said, I'm a nostalgia hoarder. I want to keep everyone so close to me all the time. And I've had so much heartbreak, but also so much joy finding these new women in my life. Some of my best friends I only met 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and now they're the closest people in my life, and I love that. And yeah, they're such an integral part. My husband does not want to hear me rehash the situation that I was in 6 years ago for the 700th time with this new detail I just thought of. But my friend Mo was like, let's buckle up, let's talk about it. That's why they're so important, because they're there to repeat those stories over and over until they're their own. And yeah, I think it's a really essential part of just being alive. Yeah, thank you.
I also think sometimes women can just see you differently. They just see you differently than a partner or a child or whatever it is. It's like a clarity. You talked about your text threads of like you can really. I mean, I would probably go to jail if someone saw some of the text threads of my girlfriends. But like it's a candor you need. It's a safe place. Yeah. Okay, so maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah, we've got a few over here. And just so everyone else knows, when we say goodbye and thank Kate at the end of the evening, if you could just hang tight with your books, we're going to take one quick picture with her on stage and everyone's books behind them. Go ahead.
Hi, Kate. This is such an honor to be here. I've been working these gigs for many years, and tonight I said to my working partner, who wasn't a woman, but he is as good as a woman. Okay. And I said, is everybody smiling at you? And he goes, yeah, because I thought it was just me. Yeah. But anyway, so, women rock. I'm an Anne Lamott fan. I'm a 4, and I'm a writer, and I taught writing, and I'm just so enthused to be here. I just want to thank you. I wish I had a question. You're bringing up, I can't swear, do it. Just do it, and just get it out there. And it's okay to be afraid. It's okay that our ego absolutely sucks, but we just have to see it. And then, like you said, oh my God, we just keep learning and learning and learning. And I don't have a question. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was so nice.
That is such a great woman thing, by the way. It's like, I'm not going to ask you a question. I'm just going to give you your flowers and tell you you're amazing.
Nice. When you're talking about that man, it reminds me of when there's a dad in the airport and everyone's just like, look at him doing it with his kids. No one ever looks at me like that.
Okay. Maybe we're going to have the last question of the night here.
Ooh, that's a lot of pressure. I am just curious how your girlfriends celebrated this new book.
I have the earrings that one of them gave me. So glad they're not here. They have come with me to every debut event in New York. We go to the Comedy Cellar to celebrate. We go out to dinner. They text me before every event and say, you're going to kill it. There'll be texts when I get back to my phone. Yeah, they're with me every step of the way. Yeah, they're the best. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And thank you to Kate.
Thank you. I'm going to move here. It's beautiful.
Thank you for joining us for this special presentation from the National Writers Series. Join us on Monday, December 8th at 7 p.m. for a conversation with Todd Goddard and the biography Devouring Time, Jim Harrison, A Writer's Life. Based on more than 100 original interviews and drawing upon Harrison's collected papers, Devouring Time is the first and only literary biography of this beloved author, whose playful, irreverent, and spiritual work continues to find and delight new readers. Join us in person at City Opera House in Traverse City or virtually. Tickets available now at nationalwriterseries.org.